What's going on, guys? In the works and Dragon's Teeth. Yes, another DLC is right around the corner. I'm sure you guys have had no shortage of DLC breakdown type videos, but that's not what this is going to be today because, it seems like Naval Strike was just yesterday. It just came out and already it's yesterday's news because we have all sorts of cool information about Dragon's Teeth. Some of the new weapons, some of the assignments, some of the map names, etc, etc. But when I first saw Dragon's Teeth on the DLC schedule, back when they first announced Battlefield 4 Premium, they listed a couple of the themes, some guesses on what they were going to be. I looked at Dragon's Teeth and I said, okay, urban combat. That sounds awesome. Some of my favorite maps in Battlefield 3 were Sing Crossing, Grand Bazaar. I even liked Operation Metro from time to time. Urban style maps. I think that's something that Battlefield 4 severely lacks. So when I saw Dragon's Teeth being an urban themed DLC, I was like, alright, this sounds awesome. Let's sign me up. But I do have some reservations about getting too excited because they're adding a few things with this DLC that sort of made me scratch my head. And that was the Riot Shield and the EOD bot. Now don't get me wrong, I think it sounds fun. I think the Riot Shield sounds like it'll be a blast. I'm sure there'll be some really fun things that we can do with it. And the EOD bot will probably be a lot of fun to sneak up behind somebody and shoot them. But then I started to really think about it as a critical gamer because I like to look a little bit more in depth with things. I was like, well, you know what? The main problem with games like Call of Duty and particularly Battlefield 4 is they tried to do way too much. They tried to just stuff a bunch of stuff in there that didn't really have a fit within the game, and it created a very imbalanced experience. And my main concern is that something like that could be happening with Dragon's Teeth. I mean, on the surface, Riot Shields don't seem like that big of a deal. But if 64 players are running around on a server with Riot Shields, it's probably not going to be a whole lot of fun. Granted, it's not going to be necessarily an overpowered experience where you feel like you're getting crapped on because the Riot Shield is all powerful, but it would impact your enjoyment of the game, and that's something that I've always been a big proponent on. So I started thinking about it. I really hadn't come to a conclusion on it because it seems like DICE has a pretty good track record with these things for some reason. Even though on the surface they look like it could suck, I think the crossbow and Aftermath is a great example. People are like, oh, why are they bringing this crap in here? This is going to be stupid. It's going to give the reconers something to defend themselves against tanks. They don't need that. And in reality, the crossbow didn't really change much. It was more of a gimmick weapon that, if you wanted to run around and have something to snipe people at longer ranges, but it was an equipment and it was really slow to shoot, and you had to have a really long reload, you got the crossbow out. It was more of a fun type weapon, which a lot of people, in the Battlelog forums and even on the BF4 subreddit, I see them talking about things like Riot Shields, crossbows, EOD bots that can shoot noob tubes as being just gimmicks that don't really need to be in the game. So I was actually wondering what you guys thought about something like that. Do you think that the inclusion of these gimmicky type weapons is actually going to hurt the series in the long run? Because I've seen a lot of people talking about Battlefield going the way of COD, where they just try to put in these pointless gimmicks that don't actually enhance the gameplay experience whatsoever. So other than that, I really don't have a whole lot of problems with this DLC. I think it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. If you're still playing Battlefield 4 and if you're still excited for the premium content that's out there, I think that this particular DLC could actually be better than Naval Strike, which is saying a lot, because surprisingly enough, Naval Strike was a solid DLC. Minus the fact that Carrier Assault is kind of a failed game type in my eyes, I think the maps, the weapons, and just the overall atmosphere in Naval Strike was spot on. So I think that's a good thing. I think the fact that we got solid DLC to start with, because Naval Strike was our first true DLC. Yes, we got China Rising. Yes, we got Second Assault, but those were planned from the start. When you bought Battlefield 4, the first edition or whatever you want to call it, limited edition, you knew that you're going to be getting China Rising, and you probably bought Premium, which you knew at some point you're going to get Second Assault because it was some sort of exclusive for Xbox One. Eventually they'd release it on PC and PS4, Xbox 360, and PS3. So I am really excited for Dragon's Teeth. I think the inclusion of some really cool weapons like the Desert Eagle, I mean, who doesn't like the Desert Eagle? I actually think it'd be really cool if they could include some sort of like gold camo for it, so you could run around like an African warlord with your gold-plated Desert Eagle. Now a lot of people are going to scream, oh, that's a Call of Duty thing, but come on guys, it would be a lot of fun to have a gold Desert Eagle. I would probably say we should limit it to one weapon. But it does still seem like something that I like to do. But they're also bringing in a lot of weapons that work in the urban environment. The fact that they're bringing in the CS5 Macmillan, which is a tactical sniper rifle, that's used in a lot of urban environments. I actually really like that rifle, and I'm pretty excited to see it come into the game because I like the Scout Elite. It's very similar to the Scout Elite, so I'm assuming that it's going to perform pretty comparably to that weapon, which is good because that's one of the more underrated snipers in Battlefield 4. But they're also bringing back a lot of weapons that are filling some gaps that, you know, just recently I was thinking, you know, we really need a heavy-hitting gun like the G3. Because Battlefield 4 doesn't have that. You know, Battlefield 3 had the G3. If you followed me closely during Battlefield 3, you know that I love the G3. I even put a big scope on it and use it as a sniper. Well, they're bringing in a bullpup version of a 7.62 rifle. Now, you're probably like, well, why do we need something like that? Well, if you look at Battlefield 3, what's the one weapon that you notice doesn't exist? A G3A3 type weapon. That's what we need, a heavy-hitting 7.62 firing weapon. Now, I know we do have the Scar H, but it's just not the same. The Scar H doesn't have that pop that the G3 had. I really miss that about Battlefield 3. I love putting a high zoom scope on it, putting it on single fire, and taking pop shots at people at long range. It was a lot of fun. It was sort of my take on the assault sniper, if you recall my Battlefield 3 videos. So I really think that this could fill that gap that I missed with the G3A3. So hopefully it turns out to be like that. I mean, I know that they've talked about some of the potential damage stats on some of the Simtic forums, so I don't really know if it'll really be a true G3, but one can hope. But they're also bringing in small things like PDWs, like the SIG MPX PDW. That could probably fill the gap of the MP5K or whatever they called it in Battlefield 3. The MP5, the short MP5. The K stands for short, if you didn't know that. But stuff like that, I think Dragon's Teeth is the first DLC that gets back to what we loved about the Battlefield 3 DLC, which is good because they needed to do that. I felt like they tried really hard to make Naval Strike feel different from what Battlefield 3 worked with. And I mean, they did a good job with it, but I think back to Close Quarters and Armored Kill and Aftermath and all those DLCs that I loved, and I was like, what did they do well? Well, what they did well is 4 great maps and great weapons or great vehicles. And I think that's what they need to focus on going forward with the next handful of DLCs, starting with Dragon's Teeth. And from the look of the weapon list, I think they're off to a pretty good start. Now, I'm guessing this will probably be our last inclusion of weapons, unfortunately. This tends to be the case. You know, the first couple DLCs have some weapon packs. Then after that, they focus more on the maps and the vehicles, which is totally fine because once you get past a certain point with you know, weapons, you can only add so many more before you're just sort of like, okay, well, you know, can't really add any more because then we would just be reskinning a bunch of stuff. But overall, what do you guys think about all this Dragon's Teeth news? I mean, there was a lot to sort of regurgitate and talk about. I didn't want this to be a breakdown video, more so a look at what Dragon's Teeth is bringing to the table and whether or not you think some of the things they've included in this DLC is going to be a gimmicky type addition. So I'm actually really curious what you guys think about the Riot Shield and the Lethal EOD bot. Be sure to leave it in the comments, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.